30. I'm Councillor Ian Fleetwood, the chairman. We have a slightly different arrangement now for the benefit of people watching on the internet or wherever. We are a newly elected councillor from May of this year. Some people have been returned, others have not made it back, but we do have new members of the committee with us. Those people that are new, and indeed the older members, the people who have come from the previous term, have engaged in training, so everybody's trained and able to carry out judgments, decisions accordingly. We aren't expecting any fire alarms this morning, and normally they are practiced a little earlier in the day, so if you hear a fire alarm, please exit the building to the rear of me onto Newland into the car park at the front. Do not run, but we aren't expecting anything untoward. I assume everyone will be following me because I won't be hanging around waiting for you. So let's assume everyone's safe. COVID-wise, everyone's spaced apart. We have 2 metres plus between different members and officers in the building. Some people will be joining the meeting via Teams, and this will be placed on the screen in front of us if they are available. I don't think I need to cover too much more with regard to how we are going to operate. Looking around and nobody's interrupting me, so that's super. We'll therefore move on. So item number 1 is apologies replacement members. Mr. Harrison, please.
No apologies, Chairman, but I notice there are a couple of empty seats from Councillor Smith, Councillor Skinner and Mrs. Overton.
Councillor Skinner has offered his apologies. Sorry, my microphone wasn't on. We've also got a new microphone system in here, so we'll see how this works as well. We're all dealing with new technology. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members can declare now or at any time during the meeting. Please say if you have anything to declare. I think at this stage, I probably should have said, and it's slightly remiss of me, I believe item 4.4 Bardney Silver Street is going to be deferred. I'll just make that comment at the beginning of the meeting. Nick?
That's correct, Chairman.
Just in case anybody is watching and wanting to see that item, so I'll save them a few minutes before we get to that point. However, everyone's welcome to stay online and watch should they wish. Moving on then to the minutes, and we had a previous meeting going back some time. I believe the meeting was on the 15th of March 2021. Can I have a proposal and second? This was a Teams meeting. I'm quite happy to propose them. My Vice Chairman, Tom Ashton, would you just like to bring your mic up?
Very happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
Of course, not everybody was part of that meeting, so I'll just, if there are any dissenters or people wishing to make any comment with regard to those meetings, with that meeting, would they like to make a comment now? Otherwise, I'm just trying to look round. How many people were there? Yes, there was 1 or 2. Well, just a quick show of hands then, just to say that you're happy with the minutes for those people. Yep, so everyone that was at the meeting is happy with those minutes. So, therefore, I'll move you on rapidly to item 4, traffic items, and the first one's 4.1, A153 at Greyleys, and that's a proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Pages 11 to 18 of the report, just to help you. So, an officer introduction, please, Jan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Jan Gibson. I'm the Programme Leader for Minor Works and Traffic. First paper today relates to a speed limit, proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on the A153 Greyleys. Greyleys is situated to the west of Sleaford.
Can I just interrupt you slightly and
Sorry.
say, can you be either a little bit louder or speak closer to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Greyleys is situated to the west of Sleaford on the A153. Members and the previous committee may remember, we brought a paper in February to look at a borderline case for this 30-mile-an-hour limit, which we'd established, where we'd established a mean speed of 35 miles per hour. This committee approved the 30-mile-an-hour limit as shown at Appendix B as a borderline case, and we subsequently went out to consultation. We received one objection to the proposed 30-mile-an-hour limit based on feeling that the limit was inappropriate for the area, that additional signing would be in the area, and also that it would be too short to enforce. In response to that, we've been able to justify this 30-mile-an-hour limit against both the rural policy and via the mean speed. There's been a number of accidents here, and we hope that this 30 will reduce the incidence of these. The signage will be limited, as we're not permitted to use 30-mile-an-hour repeaters in a street-lit area. And I think it is the minimum length required for police enforcement. So the recommendation in the report is that the committee overrules the objection so that we can advertise this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. As always with the committee, I assume that members have read the reports prior to coming to meetings. I'm sure one or two questions might have been asked at various points, so it does help people with the decision making. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to the reports. I'll just have a quick look round. I can't see anybody burning to make their maiden speech. So from the chair, then, I'm going to propose that we accept the report as printed.
Chairman, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pepper. I am healthy. Allegedly. Okay, thank you. So it's now seconded by Councillor Pepper. I will therefore put it to the vote. All in favour, please show now. And a quick look round shows that's unanimous, but I will ask if there is anybody against or any abstentions, just for the sake of completeness. Thank you. So that's all for that one. So I'll move you on to the next report, which is 4.2, Tattershall Thorpe, the B1192, a proposed speed limit reduction on pages 19 to 26. We're just going to revive the PowerPoint presentation in the chamber. So there's a little pause here. Excellent, thank you. We can now see the presentation in the chamber, so I'll call on Jan Gibson again, the programme leader, to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for that delay. This relates to proposed speed limit reductions at Tattershall Thorpe, B1192. The B1192 links Tattershall with Woodall Spa and goes through Tattershall Thorpe. The existing limits through the village are the existing 40 is shown in blue and the existing 30 is shown in green. We carried out speed surveys and established mean speeds of 43.8 in the unrestricted area and 34.4 in the existing 40. These mean speeds render both locations as borderline cases. So we're proposing that the existing 40 is reduced to 30 and the existing unrestricted length is reduced to 40. And this will be subject to the approval of this committee. So the recommendation is that the committee approves these reductions as borderline cases so that we can proceed with the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll open it to committee. Vice Chairman, would you like to speak to this one?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a incredibly welcome proposal that we have on the table here. I am the local member for Tattershall, and I appreciate this is something that has come up from time to time with the local communities there. It builds on the work that we've already done looking at linking the speed limits at the south of the village and just tying all of that up so that speed limits genuinely make sense, that you're not constantly yo-yoing. And looking at the way that this works as you come in from the north, slowing that traffic down as it approaches those first bends with that quarry access there, I think makes an awful lot of sense, and I'm very happy to move the paper, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I represent an area adjoining your area, and I know this road very well, so I also can support this speed limit reduction, so I'm quite happy to second. However, would anybody else like to speak to the report? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. Just like you good people, I'm very familiar with this particular area, going to Woodall Spa, and I would just endorse exactly what's being asked. But I think it's good for us to be able to debate that we do actually know the areas that we're actually voting on. Thank you.
I think given a period of time, some of the newer members will also, by the time we've had some site visits here and there, I'm sure a lot of people are quite familiar with Lincolnshire, but the road network is quite interesting in places. Okay, so anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will therefore put it to the vote. All in favour, please show now. And that is unanimous. But I will say anybody against and any abstentions. Seeing nobody indicating those points, that is therefore carried as printed. The next item then is at 4.3, it's Doddington Main Street, B1190, the proposed buffing crossing facility, pages 27 to 34. So again, Jan Gibson, please.
Thank you. This is a proposed puffing crossing at Doddington Village, which lies just to the west of Lincoln on the B1190. We had a request for a toucan crossing at this point. Doddington Hall is a very popular venue. It has a overflow car park across the road, which is very well used, and this generates quite a lot of pedestrian traffic across the road. So following an initial assessment to identify the desire line, we identified this location as being the most likely place for a crossing facility and carried out the necessary survey. The survey result came in at 0.47, which just falls short of the 0.5 required for a pedestrian refuge. However, in the policy, members are able to sanction an installation if the score lies within 10% of the threshold required. This being the case, a pedestrian refuge can be approved by this committee. However, there is insufficient space in the carriageway for a pedestrian refuge to be constructed to current standards without significant widening of the road, which will entail a lot of extra cost. So this committee is, in those circumstances, able to sanction an upgrade to a zebra crossing. However, at this location, the traffic flows are too high for a zebra crossing. So again, this committee is able to sanction an upgrade to a puffing crossing, which is push button variety, and therefore that is what is proposed at this location. So the recommendation is that the committee supports a bid for funding for the feasibility, design and installation of a puffing crossing at this location. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll therefore open it to committee. Would anybody like to speak to the report? Councillor Reid, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, this is really good news. I'm sure there's many other people in this room are campaigning for similar situations in different locations. But clearly we can see the advantages of having an upgrade to a puffin crossing or zebra crossing from a pedestrian refuge. It clearly makes great sense, and I think it's just a really good news story, and I'd encourage other members of a similar mind to recommend this. I think it's excellent, and I'm really, really pleased for this community. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've seen this location both as a driver and also as a, dare I say, I don't think I need to declare an interest, a customer to Doddington Hall when I've been into various events at the establishment. I've seen the traffic coming through, so I've seen it from both a pedestrian aspect and from a driving aspect, and I wholly support the recommendation. It goes forwards, and that the consultation can be pursued with regard to this, so that the funding bid can be put together for the feasibility study. Councillor Mrs Newton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second this recommendation. It looks as though it's good news all round.
Rather than me second it, I thought I'd allow you to. Yes, no problem. So, would anybody else like to speak? Seeing none, so therefore I'll put it to the vote. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, that was unanimous for granting the permission. The next item, 4.4, Bardney Silver Street, the proposed waiting restriction. We agreed at the beginning of the meeting, a little earlier, that this was going to be deferred, just in order to make sure that everything is in place and we've got everything correct. So that will hopefully be coming back to the next meeting. Okay. 4.5 then is Long Bennington Main Road, proposed mandatory cycle lanes, the advisory cycle lanes and the waiting restrictions. Again, Jan, can you talk to this one, please?
Thank you. So this proposal relates to mandatory and advisory cycle lanes and waiting restrictions on Main Road at Long Bennington to the north of the village. Long Bennington is situated just off the A1 between Grantham and Newark. This plan indicates where we're proposing mandatory cycle lanes supported by no waiting and no loading at any time, as shown in red, and advisory advisory cycle lanes are shown in blue, where we have part-time waiting restrictions. We had meetings with the parish council, local member, and the sports representative from the sports facilities, because we wanted to mitigate the impact of parking restrictions on people visiting those facilities and the playground and the bowling green. So what we've come up with is a scheme to restrict the parking during the daytime only, Monday to Friday, so that it's free for use by cyclists. And then in the evenings and at weekends, it'll be unrestricted for general traffic. However, at the same time, we intend to impose a restriction on any vehicle over 5 tonnes to park overnight, which combination of restrictions means that there'll be no parking along that entire length permitted for HGVs. And this is in recognition of a long-standing issue the village has had with overnight parking by HGVs and the associated antisocial behaviour that brings with it. It also ticks the box of the government's desire currently to promote facilities for walking and cycling. So the proposal allows us to link up with an existing proposal to the north, an existing cycle facility to the north, which runs alongside the A1 and ultimately links up to Newark. Currently you have to cross to get onto that, and we intend to apply the cycle lanes along both sides all the way into the village through the gateway here. And here's some an illustration of the type of overnight parking that we hope the proposal will eliminate. So we have had a number of objections to this scheme. I think there are concerns about parking migrating into the village, particularly HGV parking, and also concerns that restricting parking during the day and the week compromises those wishing to visit the playground. But we think that there is certainly plenty of on-street parking further south with a relatively short walk to reach those facilities. So our recommendation is that the objections as listed in the report are overruled so that we can advertise. We can proceed with this proposal and make it operative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Now, I believe if we're lucky, we might have Councillor Morn joining us via Teams to speak to the meeting. There we go, Councillor Morn. Whenever you're ready, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm speaking today in favour of the proposals that Jan has brought to the committee. The details of the scheme have been developed in close consultation with both the Parish Council and the Playing Field Management Committee, with an on-site meeting last year to agree the details before we went out to public consultation. Importantly, the single yellow line that Jan referred to, proposed outside the sports facilities, will ensure that evening and weekend parking for visitors to those facilities is still possible. For daytime users of the facilities, parking would be possible south of Westborough Lane, which is only a short walk. However, the Parish Council and Playing Field Committee are exploring options for a limited number of off-street parking spaces in the future. So hopefully that reassures members about some of the objections. As well as improving cycle links to neighbouring villages of Claypole and Dry Doddington, it also improves and connects the village to Newark Town Centre, which is our nearest town. And there is, of course, the added bonus that it will remove the dangerous overnight lorry parking from the north end of the village. Now, we have suffered for well over a decade 20 to 30 HGVs every night parking along the north end of the village and leaving high levels of litter and human waste in our village verges. The cycle scheme will ensure cyclists can pass safely onto the joining A1 cycle path, but it will also put an end to that overnight lorry parking, which Anne mentioned in her report. Now, there have been concerns in the village that the scheme could displace HGVs into the built-up residential parts of Long Bennington, and that is the main theme of those public objections. However, I am reassured by highways officers that there are permit issues for HGVs that do this, therefore it is unlikely. Highways have said they will continue to monitor the impact of any scheme if approved and take necessary and appropriate action if that did become a problem. But we are confident it wouldn't be. And it is on that basis that I ask for your support today to improve and put in this cycle link and end the HGV overnight parking in our village. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments, Councillor. So I will therefore open it to committee from the chair. I again know this area. I frequent the A1 quite often. Quite happy to support the proposal. Councillor Mrs Newton, followed by Councillor Reid.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may. I'm not against this, but I am a bit concerned about displacement of vehicles. I heard the member say that the planning officers would be able to deal with any miscreants or people who do go and park their vehicles probably in the middle of the village, and I just wondered how they would deal with that and under what powers, because I suspect we've all got some of these vehicles we would like dealing with. So if I could have an answer to that, please, Chairman.
Thank you. The restrictions within the village on parking are quite few and far between, so effectively HGVs could theoretically move into the village, and that's the concern that we have. As Councillor Morn said, we'll keep an eye on that and see if that does actually happen, and then reconsider what we might do about it.
Thank you. It doesn't quite answer my question, because my question was, is there any powers? Because I thought John was sort of suggesting to us if it did happen they could deal with it, but it seems there's no powers. They probably won't be able to deal with it other than bring it back to us and tell us what's happening. Is that the answer, Chairman?
I think it's the problem is it's displacement parking, isn't it? Whereby if there is an implication put on this part of the road, the HGVs will move further into the village. So therefore, at that stage, we will then have to look at putting some other type traffic restrictions at those places to ensure that the displaced parking is not is moved again and it's removed from that position. The difficulty, of course, then comes, it would then be down to the police to enforce such regulations. Jan, is that correct?
No, in fact, the County Council enforces parking restrictions. The police still enforce the moving restrictions, but we would enforce any these. For instance, we would enforce this restriction if it went in. But as you say, if we often do have concerns about displacement, but it's something that we can't really predict, so we like to wait and see what happens and then react from there.
But it would certainly have to be a double act between LCC and County to ensure everything was in place at that point. Councillor Reid, you were indicating.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, we are clearly listening to the community here, and the displacement is an issue. But on balance of looking at the displacement, this is a very large village and it has a great capacity, so it will eliminate the situation in this particular spot. And as everybody agrees, I think we're just going to have to monitor where it goes from here, to be fair. So I will look forward to supporting the motion. Thank you.
I don't think I have a seconder yet. Sorry, seconded by Councillor Reid then. Okay, would anybody else like to speak to the application? Councillor Mrs Austin.
Chairman, I'm just going to take this opportunity of saying, when you speak facing that way, I can't hear you. We've got Jan, so we can now hear her, but we can hear everyone else then, except you. I'm sorry, Chairman.
Thank you for your comments. I'll speak either louder or closer to the microphone. Okay, right. So, therefore, I have this application proposed and seconded that the objections are overruled and the proposal is approved as advertised. All in favour, please show now. Thank you. That's 99% in favour. Anybody against? And abstentions?
Apologies, I missed part of the debate.
Thank you. That, for the benefit of the video, that was Councillor Mrs Overton who joined us part of the way through that presentation. Okay, so that is the end of the traffic regulation orders. Thank you very much, Jan, for attending this morning. It's good to see you after such a long break. And we will now move over to the planning officers, so we can deal with the county matters planning applications. Obviously, there is a distinct difference between county applications and district applications. District councils tend to deal with more with domestic type properties. County tends to focus around mineral extraction resources, and also county applications for schools, extensions, libraries, that type of application. So if that helps people watching online. So we've now had a change in officers. Mr McBride's in the chair. So I'll move you on to item 5.1, QC on page 51, to extract and process sand and gravel and to progressively restore the site to a mixture of agricultural land, nature conservation area and an agricultural water reservoir at King Street, Grateford. And this is planning application S20/1351. The floor is yours, Neil, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. My name is Neil McBride. I'm Head of Planning at Lincolnshire County Council, and I'll take you through the first of the planning items this morning. So as the Chairman's already said, this item takes us to the south of the county, land at King Street, Grateford. The Chairman's already introduced the item, but I'll give a little bit more detail. The proposed development would constitute the creation of a new sand and gravel quarry with a restoration strategy to create three separate but linked after uses, being low-level agriculture, an irrigation lagoon and wetland habitat. The 55.5 hectare site comprises a parcel of agricultural land of grade 2, 3A and 3B. This land has approximately 3 million tonne reserve of saleable sand and gravel and would be worked and restored over a period of 16 years with a production rate of roughly 187,500 tonnes per annum. Just go through the slides to give you a little bit more background to the application, to see the detail of it. So the first slide on the screen shows the location plan. So we're at the south of the county. So in terms of the geography, we're just to the northwest of Market Deeping, close to the county boundary with Cambridgeshire. The site is situated on King Street, and you can see on the plan in front of you there, the site is outlined in red, and the proposed access point is shown at the southern end of the site. And you can see on the screen there, and hopefully on your plans, that the area that's shown in green is the proposed extent of the road improvements on King Street, which is referred to in the committee report. Oh, there we go. Sorry, there's a bit of delay between me pressing the button and the picture moving on. So this first photograph is at the southern boundary of the application site. You can see marked on there the arrows showing the location of the proposed access, and this is looking onto King Street. Next photograph, again at the southern part of the application site, looking over where the proposed processing plant would be situated. Again, just you can see King Street in the foreground. This photograph's taken at the northern end of the application site, with Baston Road at the boundary of the northern part of the application site, and again looking at the straight road of King Street, which runs adjacent to the eastern boundary of the application site. This photograph shows the approximate position of the proposed access onto King Street. This photograph looks northwards along King Street and is the section of King Street which is proposed to be improved and widened through a section 106 agreement. And this photograph here is at the northern end of the site, showing its basically use as agricultural land, although these photographs were taken towards the end of the harvest season last year. A few of the slides now just to show some plans. So this shows in a bit more detail the extent of the application site in red. Next slide shows the location of the access point. This slide or plan shows typical processing plants which will be used to process the sand and gravel once it's been extracted. This slide shows the phases of the production. So we'd start off in the southeastern part of the site once the sort of processing plant had been constructed, and then we go around in an anti-clockwise direction. So we've got plan block A, block B, block C, block D, block E, and block F, which is the direction of travel for the processing. And this slide shows the proposed restoration requirements, and I'll draw your attention to the agricultural irrigation reservoir close to the southern boundary of the site. So that concludes the presentation. If I can just draw your attention to the committee report. I won't go through the report, as the chairman says, on the basis that you would have read the report before the meeting, but just to highlight some aspects that I just need to draw to your attention. So In terms of the publicity and consultation, sorry, I haven't got the page numbers on my report, so if I just refer to the paragraph numbers. So paragraph 14 sets out the results of the consultation and publicity, and you'll see there at 14B, Greatford Parish Council have raised a number of objections to the application, in particular regarding traffic and safety along King Street, and their detailed concerns are set out in the report. Whilst highlighting their issues or concerns about traffic, they also raise some other points in connection with noise, air quality, light, agricultural land, and habitat issues for farmland, birds and other wildlife, concerns about restoration in terms of when the details are available, and water issues. And finally, mentioning the concern about archaeology. So those are all set out in the report there for you. And moving on from there, Boholm and Stowe Parish Council have also raised concerns about the traffic on King Street, and even with the additional information that has been provided, they still maintain their original objection. And following on from there, there's a list of other parish councils in the locality who also have made comments regarding the application. Moving on, after the various parish councils that have been identified in the report, you'll see that the Environment Agency have raised no objection to the application, subject to an informative. Importantly, the highways officers have confirmed that following the submission of further information, the highway officer requests that any permission that's granted by the planning authority shall include conditions relating to highway improvements, access, HGV cleaning, and also routing, and the inclusion of an informative regarding a requirement for a section 278 under the Highways Act for improvements to King Street. I think they're the main, I've highlighted the main consultee responses, the ones that you need to have particular regard to. If we move on to paragraph 16, you'll see there that we've received a total of 179 representations to this application, and 162 of those have raised objection. Again, without going through the details of those objections, they are set out clearly in the reports for you to see, so the main concerns have related to traffic on King Street, which has been the principal issue of concern. Also draw your attention to the fact that there has been some representation supporting the application, and again they're set out in the report for you. Paragraph 17 sets out the response from South Kesteven District Council, who do not have any objections to the application, but do raise some issues that need to be addressed, and they're set out in the report. So moving on to the conclusions, which the issues that have been raised in the application in terms of the need for the sand and gravel, that's set out clearly for councillors to see. And also just need to emphasise that the site is an allocated site in the County Council's Minerals and Waste Local Plan site location document. So that has been through a process of examination, and as I say, the site is allocated as a site to be brought forward for sand and gravel extraction in the site location document. So that's a material consideration for you when considering the application today. So as I say, going through the conclusion section, paragraph 21 sets out the reasons in terms of a need for sand and gravel in this area and county-wide. Then over the page, we go through the environmental and amenity considerations. And again, I won't go through all of those. They're all set out clearly in the report for you to see. So bringing it all together in terms of the conclusion, the recommendation is that the applicant be invited to enter into a Section 106 planning obligation to cover the matters of routing and to provide a long-term management plan for the site to ensure continuous aftercare of the restored wetland habitat. Subject to the applicant concluding and completing the Section 106 agreement, then the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions that 45 conditions set out in Appendix B of the committee report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McBride. Now, with this application, we do have one or two speakers who are going to join us via Teams. I'll give you a running order. First of all, Vanessa Smith, an objector, will speak for up to 3 minutes, and then the committee, if they should wish, can cross-examine Vanessa with questions so that they can form an opinion. Followed by Simon Tucker, whose Quartet Ashton Estates will speak again for 3 minutes. He's speaking on behalf of the applicant, I believe. Followed by the chair of Grateford Parish Council, Philip Britton, who is an objector. Normally, we would only allow 3 minutes for one situation to go one way or another, but I believe there's been, this is the first attempt at running Teams, so we are going to attempt to allow, with my discretion, the two objectors to speak. The committee can then speak, officers will respond to those questions, and then finally we will look for motions to be put one way or another, to be proposed and seconded. So I'm going to start off hopefully with Vanessa Smith. If you are here, please address the meeting. You're currently on mute. Unfortunately, we can't hear you at the moment. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Alas, you are still on mute. The wonderful frustration of IT. I think I can see you changing your microphone, so we'll just bear with you a little bit and see if we can help you. Oh, I nearly heard that.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now?
Excellent. Welcome to the meeting. It's rather like a moon landing, this, isn't it? First time for everything.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. The floor is yours when you're ready to start.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Sorry, I'll blame NHS technology. Thank you. Right. So thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'll just read out the statement that I prepared. So the morning after I found out about this meeting, I woke up in a bit of a cold sweat. I dreamt that I found a motorcyclist dead in the ditch opposite my house. It skidded on mud on the road. I have lived on the King Street Stowe Road crossroads for the past 6 years. My house is around half a mile south of the proposed quarry exit, and it is a well-known accident black spot. Prior to lockdown, there was a road traffic accident directly outside my house on average every 3 to 4 months, normally with emergency services present. For whatever reason, accidents are not always officially recorded, and as such, the transport statement that's attached to this application is woefully incomplete. I can stand in my upstairs bedroom and watch traffic straddle King Street, travelling at speeds in excess of 90 miles an hour. I watch the traffic skim past each other and hear the hoot of horns on a daily basis. I would like to know why increasing the road width by just 20 centimetres to accommodate up to 100 extra HGVs per day is sufficient. King Street at the West Deeping Quarry had to be widened to over 6 metres for this purpose, and this has also been the case for the quarry at Baston. Why is 5.5 metres for this quarry deemed sufficient? Indeed, given that plans now propose that all site traffic enter and exit the site from the south, lorries will frequently pass each other, and as such, a minimum of 6.8 metres is recommended by the government's own highway guidelines. I quote, "This minimum width shall be 6.8 metres for roads where buses or heavy goods vehicles are likely to pass each other on a regular basis." Besides the transport statement containing incomplete accident data, the traffic survey was also conducted during the week of the Easter bank holiday Monday, and as such, the traffic levels would be unlikely to be typical. There had been well over 100 objections raised by local residents, and the main concern is road safety. King Street is already a death trap, and allowing the current plans to pass is surely negligent. Increasing road width would help, but I do not think that this alone will reduce serious accidents. The transport statement found up to 13 cars a day were travelling in excess of 90 miles an hour.
Last 30 seconds.
Enforcing a reduced speed limit is therefore also essential. When the next person dies on King Street, questions will surely be asked as to whether the quarry traffic contributed. If these plans pass in their current form, the people that have permitted this will surely face serious questioning. For the record, I don't mind living close to a quarry. Indeed, the excavation sites at West Deeping are closer to my house. However, I do mind finding dead people and emergency services in my front garden. On behalf of all of the local residents who have objected, I would seriously urge you to reject these plans. They are unsafe and they are in breach of the current published government highway guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for your comments, but you've disappeared. I was just going to ask if there were any questions that the committee would like to ask of Vanessa, but it appears she's logged off.
Oh, I'm still here.
No, excellent, you're still there. Does the committee have any questions of Vanessa before she leaves us? I see. Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you. And it might be the sound. I didn't hear as well as I might, but there was the point about the breadth of the road and the highway regulations. Could you just say which ones you quoted? I didn't quite catch it, and the width that you expected, and what regulation that was.
So there were lots of highway guidelines. So the 6.8 metres comes from a rural highway document on the government website, which I can send you the reference for, but I don't have sort of at my fingertips at the moment. And then there was also the street plans, which indicated similarly, but for more residential areas. But it was 6.8 metres is recommended for where heavy goods vehicles are likely to pass each other on a regular basis.
Thank you.
And okay.
Thank you. Is there any other questions of Vanessa? Okay, well, thank you very much for your contribution. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
I'll therefore move on to the next speaker, who is Simon Tucker, Quartet Ashton Estate. Again, we can afford up to 3 minutes for you to address the meeting. We can do a test on technology before you start, if you wish. And then from there, potentially there might be a question or two to follow. Floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Excellent, thank you. I'll start then. So thanks for the time this morning. My name's Simon Tucker. I'm a director of DTA, a traffic and transport consultant acting on behalf of the applicant. You have in front of you a comprehensive and thorough report from your officers, and I note the overall conclusions are a recommendation for approval, which of course we support. One of the significant merits of the Manor Farm site is that it is largely unacceptable. There are few, if any, interesting features on this isolated parcel of land. being circa 55 hectares flat, well-drained, remote from the nearest residence, around 420 metres, and the nearest village of Baston, around 440 metres, and remote from any distinguishing heritage features. All the relevant potential impacts of the proposed gravel quarry have been explored in detail in the application and supporting EIA. These include a detailed report of all likely impacts, including noise, dust, air quality, heritage features, and hydrology. The overall conclusion of those reports is that the scheme is wholly acceptable and policy compliant, subject to the usual planning conditions. The transport aspects of the site merit more detailed comments. The scheme has been subject to a detailed transport assessment and addendum, which has been scoped and agreed with the Highway Authority. Discussions have taken place about potential mitigation, as I will now discuss. The site borders the straight road of King Street. In statistical terms, the circa 1 kilometre straight road south of the quarry is safe and appropriate to serve the development. The site went through a formal mineral plan adoption process and was found to be acceptable. However, as part of the application, a scheme of mitigation has been agreed with the council, and this comprises, as you've heard, a routing agreement secured by Section 106 agreement, which will prevent movement through nearby villages. A carefully designed T-junction access to the quarry, which will direct all HGVs from the site to the south, hence avoiding the junction with King Street and the A15. And the widening of 1 kilometre of King Street to a minimum width agreed by the County Council, as you've heard, 5.5 metres, to allow 2 HGVs to pass. As mentioned, the site is generally unremarkable. However, in addition to meeting the critical land supply need for minerals in the local plan, it will also allow, in the restoration, the creation of an irrigation reservoir. This will have dramatic benefit in terms of crop diversification for the farmer of up to 400 acres of the nearby farm. Farmer in this instance, the applicant, Dr. Charles Lane, has a doctorate from Zoology Department in Oxford. Thank you for listening. I hope this brief summary helps the committee consider the merits of the scheme in parallel with the report that you've read, but obviously I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your comments. I'm looking around the room to see if there's any questions of you, and I can say that there is nobody wishing to cross-examine you. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
I'll therefore move on to the next speaker, which is the Chair of Greatford Parish Council, Philip Britton. So are you there, Mr. Britton, please? Councillor Britton, in fact.
Good morning. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent. We can hear you. So whenever you're ready, please address the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Our primary objection to the development of the proposed quarry is the effect of the increase in HGV traffic upon the road safety of King Street and the surrounding villages, including Greatford. The transport statement shows 16,329 vehicles per week use the road with speeds up to 68.5 miles an hour and an average of 57 miles an hour. King Street is a fast road and has a collision rate higher than the national average. There have been 23 collisions in the last 5 years, including severe and fatal collisions. The applicant's transport statement is incomplete as it has no assessment of the likely impact at the main junction of King Street and the A1175, even though this is the proposed route to and from the proposed quarry. The junction has a history of at least 6 collisions in the last 5 years. Also, the applicant's transport statement shows no collisions occurred at the Stowe Road junction, yet LCC's own data shows 5 collisions have occurred here, including recent fatal collisions, which Vanessa referred to. King Street is for a significant proportion of its length less than 5.5 metres wide, and most HGVs are over 3 metres wide when the mirrors are included. This means that 2 HGVs could not pass on some parts of King Street unless they slow down and mount the verge to avoid collision. LCC's own website states that for road design advice, refer to the design manual for roads and bridges when speed limits are over 40 miles an hour. This manual states that a road should be 7.3 metres wide. LCC also required King Street to be widened 7.3 metres from the junction with the A1175 up to the existing quarry entrance site, and the applicant's proposed site entrance is also 7.3 metres wide. Why is LCC suggesting that a road width of just 5.5 metres is wide enough for this proposed quarry when their own published guidance, planning precedents and common sense demonstrate that it isn't? The suggested routing strategy of the proposed quarry is flawed and will not be sufficient to prevent quarry traffic using the side roads off King Street. The existing routing agreements for the other quarries in the area only succeed in routing the quarry operators' own vehicles via the prescribed routes. They do not stop other hauliers working out of these quarries from using Greatford as a shortcut. We never see any Hanson or Cemex lorries, the quarry operators' lorries in the village, but we do see many other operators' vehicles. In an 18-day period from mid-February to early March 2020, we observed 14 different hauliers operating tipper trucks through the village.
Last 30 seconds, please.
The T-junction with Main Street and Carby Road in Gretford is narrow, and HGVs regularly mount the pavement when encountering other traffic at this junction, creating significant danger for pedestrians. The environmental impact from vibration, noise and diesel fumes should not be underestimated. Gretford urgently needs a weight limit to protect the village and its residents from the hazards created by HGVs use in the village as a rat run. The proposed quarry traffic and the traffic it will generate increases this need, and we urge you to carefully consider the overall impact on the area and reject this application. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to share 3 images that illustrate the road safety issues that I've raised.
Certainly, if you have some illustrations, just show me now, please.
I can't present, only meeting organisers can share the screen.
Okay.
Fortunately.
I don't think we have the ability to take that data at this stage. So, unfortunately not. Okay. So I think the time is up now, is it?
The time's up, yes.
Thank you. So I will ask the committee, therefore, if they have any comments of the Chair of Grateford Parish Council. Councillor Mrs Newton.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask, please, you quoted several points about road widths. Could you remind me, please, where you got that information from?
Yes, it was, just a second. One of our parishioners is a traffic consultant. He provided me with it. It's the design manual for roads and bridges, which is the LCC's website refers to.
Thank you for that comment. Is there any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you for your comments then, Councillor Britton. I will ask, before I allow the committee to speak, Mr McBride, do you have anything to say with regard to any of the speakers so far?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just in terms of the highway and traffic matters, because obviously clearly that's a very contentious part of this application. The original application, when it was submitted, there was some issues with the original transport assessment, and that basically resulted in a request for more information and clarification of that original transport assessment. There was also a site meeting comprising plan officer, highways officer and representatives from the local community to talk about the highway issues. And following on from that, additional information was submitted, and as you've seen in the report, the highways officer is content that the methodology that's been used in the transport assessment is robust and acceptable, and that the width of those road improvements at a minimum of 5.5 metres is consistent with county council policy. So just to make you aware of that.
Thank you for those comments. So I'll therefore open it to committee. Councillor Reid first, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I am the neighbouring division county councillor and represent, for those of you that perhaps wouldn't be quite familiar with the south of the district, Bourne South and Thirlby. I support this application. It has in the reading 16 years of resources which will be much needed, but it's a matter of getting it right. And to help other members as I continue to talk, a lot of what is the information is on page 86. There has been a lot of representation, including made to our local MP, and indeed from what we've heard from Gretford Parish Council. Neil McBride mentions very correctly that 162 out of 179 respondents have actually rejected and object largely to the weight restriction for Gretford and the villages surrounding. There is opposition, there is a great concern for road safety, and in particular I'm very disappointed to have to listen to the Highways Officer's recommendation to increase the road width to 5.5 metres. There seems, Chairman, to be some irregularities here, because I struggle within my ward with South Fen Road, and we are actually going to get a capital improvement scheme there, which is going to be phased in 3 phases, and that's actually going to be widened to 6 metres, and that is largely because of the HGV and industrial usage down there. I have another concern in that it's been described to me by the parish councils and they've done a lot of work, and they've worked very hard on this, and they really are concerned about where they live and what's actually going to happen. And King Street is an exceedingly long stretch of road which there are excessive speeds. Believe you me, they really, really are. And it's quite narrow in places as well. But Lincolnshire Planning Department asked the applicant for an HGV routing via the S106 agreement, and we see that it's going to be, or it's recommended here that it's by the south route. I'll come back to that. This conflicts with the information received from Paul Little, head of the Lincolnshire Highways Asset Management, who stated, with regard to planning permissions, the advice from central government is that planning conditions are not appropriate means of controlling the right of passage over public highways. Such conditions are likely to be very difficult to deliver effectively. So again, getting back to my opening statement, Chairman, it's a matter of us as a committee trying to actually get this right. We have another difficulty in Lincolnshire, of course, because, as I understand it, we don't have a weight limit policy yet. This is my second term as a member with your good self, Chairman, and that's very disappointing. I used to be a representative, I used to be a county councillor in the tiny county of Rutland. Yes, it has quarries there, and yes, I understand about weight limit restrictions. It's like a spider's web, as other members know from various difficulties where you put weight limits on. If you're not careful, it causes other problems besides. So it's very, but without any facility for weight restrictions, then nothing can be regulated at all, and I just don't quite understand why we cannot do it here. The parish states, and they're not wrong in their assessment of, it's a very, very busy stretch of road. Often it's used as an alternative to the A15, and it has illegal speed limits, believe you me, of they say that they have done a constructive period of 7 days from the 24th of April last year, and indeed during those 7 days the average number of people using was over 16,000 users, and the illegal speed of 68.5 miles per hour northbound and 65.7 southbound. So I can demonstrate the urgency of the situation here. I ask, when we come to recommendations, Chairman, that perhaps we could, presumably we could look for an expedient of a traffic regulation order to look at the speed aspect of what is in this application, or at least I hope that we can. I think I've mentioned most of what I would like to say. There's 2 things at the end of the day that the parish council, if there's and the people that live there, would like to see happens. One is that the request is granted, that should the planning application be granted, that a condition for the approval is that King Street will be widened. And I think there is the issue of whether we're going to go with the Highways recommendation of 5.5 metres, or as I've been able to quote, we can do 6 metres, and in fact, what is asked for here is somewhere in debate between 6.8 and 7.3 metres. There's certainly an issue there. And secondly, that the residents, particularly of Gretford, really do demand a 7.5 tonne weight limit. Now, because we don't have policy, that's very difficult. But one of the things I'm hoping the officers can do this morning for us is show us some confidence that in the 106 agreement, if it be that the routing and the traffic is only to go south, how is that going to be regulated and how is it going to be policed? And it actually, I urge on the side of caution, and my confidence is worried because, like in a previous speeding deliberation this morning by my colleague, Councillor Newton behind me, she asked exactly the same question: what policy do we have? And actually, we didn't at that point. I guess I've said enough. I'd like to listen to other people and debate, and I thank you for bearing with me in the length of time in actually putting this situation forward. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of points there. Mr McBride, do you have any comment?
I'll just try and pick up on a couple of the points. In terms of the advice that the parish council have received, or the information from Paul Little, I don't know, I've not seen that information, but in terms of routing agreements, well, in terms of basically restrictions in terms of where vehicles can go on the public highway, that it's not possible to control that by a planning condition. So that's why we need to have a legal agreement in terms of a Section 106 agreement. So he's right in terms of saying that conditions aren't appropriate to control routing on the public highway because that's outside the scope of planning conditions. But what we can use, and what we have used across the county for a number of years, is a Section 106 routing agreement, and that's what we use. In terms of the mechanism of enforcement and monitoring, well, clearly we don't have the resources to have officers out and about looking at sites on a daily basis. So we would rely on the public to report any breaches of that routing agreement in terms of getting the registration numbers of the vehicles and if possible the names of the operator. And then the method of enforcement of that is through an injunction if we got sufficient evidence that the routing agreement was being breached. Then the method of dealing with that would be, the enforcement method would be via an injunction, and that's how that would be used. But it is something that we do rely on. We would rely on the public to make us aware of those breaches, because, as I say, we won't have officers there every day. Sites are inspected, but not on a daily basis. In terms of the traffic regulation order, and I might just ask my legal colleague just to confirm that, I don't think there's a way that we can achieve that through a Section 106 agreement, because it's involving another sort of process in terms of going out to consultation and things like that, and there's no guarantee that that could be brought into place. So I'll just look over to my legal colleague who might just give me some confirmation about that.
Thanks, Neil. Yes, in relation, I wholeheartedly agree with the point about it being an obligation, not a condition. In terms of a traffic regulation order, actually what can happen is that you can have it within a Section 106 for them to make the payment for the process, but as you correctly say, it's a different process, so it can't be determined. It can only be the process is started and then it goes out for consultation, etc. The difficulty with this position is probably that, from what's been said, Section 106 obligations are to mitigate the development, whereas it appears to me that what we're actually saying is that there's speeding already down that road, and that's not being created by this development. So therefore, we cannot seek an obligation to deal with a pre-existing issue. So I appreciate from what everyone said that it's a straight road and it's fast, but it was a matter that would sit outside this planning application itself to determine whether or not a traffic regulation order ought to be put in place. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'll therefore move on to Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Baxter is the local member and he has contacted me with comments, so I'll include them in my comments if that's okay. Thank you. I think the key point that has been picked up is about the traffic, and the routing agreement going south, I think, does seem to be the right solution. Having said that, I know routing agreements in my area have been changed subsequently, so they may survive a while until somebody asks for that to be altered. But nevertheless, it does seem to be the right thing to do. The other issue is about the safety of the road and the width of it. And as was said, people would like or have some reason to suggest that 6.8 metres to 7.3 metres width would be appropriate and include a cycle path. The other thing we've heard is that 6 metres is commonly used in other areas. And I would like to suggest that we do that, ask for this to be 6 metres. If the officers are not happy with that at the moment, then, to defer it and come back with it. But if 6 metres is acceptable in other areas, then certainly it should be here. This is a new development, and we have an opportunity to do something to make the roads a little bit more appropriate for the heavy-duty traffic it's going to get. The reason it's particularly important in these rural roads, as many of us will know, you drive along the rural roads and you've got another vehicle coming the other way. Very often somebody goes off the edge of the tarmac, and if you've got a lot of heavy-duty vehicles, that means it continually cracks away. And it's very difficult for our council to maintain roads like that. They've just got to be wide enough for 2 HGVs to pass. The issues on, and to pass safely on a road that is at the moment 60 miles an hour limit. On the speed, I think it is about enforcement, and it's very difficult for us to say, we have to look at it at 60 because that's what the speed limit is. So I think the other issues on speeding is enforcement. But what it makes me think is that it makes me recognise, and you have just raised the issue, how difficult it is to enforce the conditions. So although we're asking for vehicles to go south, that is going to be very hard to enforce. We're struggling to enforce the traffic limit at the moment. So enforcing other things are also going to be difficult. And that's why I think it's ever more important that at least we ask for the road to be wide enough. And 6 metres seems to have an established precedent. 23 collisions over 5 years is a lot. That's a lot of accidents. And I think we really have to think about that specifically here, because we're not talking about a bump in the high street. This is an accident on a fast road with vehicles going at speed up to 60 miles an hour. So it's ever more important. So I do think in this place in particular, and lastly, and I'll be a bit brief, is the issue about the cycling path that's been recommended. We have got a transport plan that we're now putting in place. We are encouraging people to do more cycling. Cycle path would be really good. I don't suppose I'm on a winner with that, but it is really important for us to think about that. And it just means that if we are increasing cycling, increasing people using walking, we're going to have to make that road at least 6 metres. Thank you.
Any comments, Mr McBride?
No, thank you, Chairman. I'll just listen to the other debates.
Okay, thank you for that. I've given you the opportunity. Councillor Pepper.
Thank you, Chairman. I do know the road in question, know it very well. Also know the area. You can also tell which are the locals and which come from the south of the county, because we call it Gretford and not Grateford, so that's a bit of a giveaway. But I'm fairly well okay with the application itself, despite arable land being used up and whatever. But as Chairman of Public Protection, this road safety bit really does concern me. There has been several accidents up that road I can recall, particularly at the Woodside Garden end and at the other end too. let alone those in the middle. And I'm not sure that we've got a head around that, the amount of accidents and whatever. And we did have a site visit a few years back for a quarry nearby. I'm not a big lover of site visits, I have to admit, but I'm just thinking we've got several new members with us, lots of others here who don't actually know the area very well. And I'll just throw that into the melting pot, Chairman, that maybe a site visit might be the way around for this one.
Are you proposing a site visit?
I'm happy to propose that. Yeah.
Microphone off, please, if you've finished.
Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Mrs Newton next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. On what I've seen and read this morning, I'm not in favour of granting this application as it is. My first thoughts when I read it was I would be opposing it. I'm recommending refusal. I'd be quite happy to go for some deferment to see if it's possible to get the road widened. We're talking about an activity here that could go on for 16 years, possibly longer, if they tag a bit onto the site. We know that happens sometimes, they extend it. We've got to get it right, and if it means deferring it, I'd be happy for that. And I think if we're going to have a site visit, that's probably the right thing to do. But I think I personally feel as a committee, we need to say we don't find 5.5 metres acceptable, and that unless it's 6 or more, we're minded to refuse it. Those are my thoughts, Chairman.
Thank you for your comments. On the back row, Councillor Mrs Austin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I hate the back row. I'm sorry. I feel out of things. Right. I know this site or this area adequately. And I think our only stalling point is this issue of the access road and the speed. We know that we can't use a planning application to solve an existing issue. We have this over and over again. Also, I'm well aware in my own area with the main industrial estate of Boston in my area of the issues of HGVs using, in my case, unappropriate residential roads and the inability to do anything, any enforcement. So I think this is going to leave us with the only option, probably, isn't it, of the actual width that we can gain through this application to make it acceptable. And although I anticipate the site visit is going to be somewhat tricky, watching vehicles on a fast-moving road like this, it was one thing standing by the in Crowland the other year, watching things going past that. But this is not going to be an easy one for us to visit, but I think it may be the only option. I don't see any other issues with this particular application other than this one of traffic at the moment. And if we can't get traffic going in one way and out another, as we have done on some previous applications, I mean, I've not been a regular member of this committee, but I've attended it enough times as a replacement, then our only other option is, because I think we need the site. It helps deliver what's in our minerals and waste policy. So let's look then and at the improvement we can do to this bit of the road and move on from there. So I think it's got to be a site visit, and I will support that. Thank you.
Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning. The first thing I think we need to remember is that this is an allocated site, if I understood Mr. McBride correctly in the report that was given. Therefore, the principle of having a quarry in this location, I think, is one that we simply have to accept. It has gone through a very rigorous process when allocation was done for the formation of the Minerals and Waste Local Plan. And I think it would be a brave planning committee which would start to row back on that. However, as Councillor Reid, I think, mentioned in his introduction, the devil is in the detail here, and the detail is incredibly important. Mr McBride has robustly defended the report, but unfortunately, when it comes to the matter of the road, we do not have with us the highways experts who we can ask detailed questions of. We can only ask those questions of the planners. I am particularly concerned about the practicalities of the width of the road, and in particular with two quarry vehicles passing. And I say this because I have on the southern fringe of the division I represent a quarry. The vehicles that come out of it are thumping great quarry lorries, and we all know what they look like, and they're very big and they're very wide. And where they come out onto an improved stretch of B road, there is no problem. About 3 miles to the north, there is a village, and in the old centre of that village, there is a constriction, a choke point, and frequently you get two of these. A lorry will be going in one direction, an HGV or bus or whatever will be coming in the other direction, and the choice is wipe off your wing mirrors or mount the pavement. These are very wide, very large, and if you're a nearby pedestrian, very frightening vehicles. 5.5 metres says there will be enough room to pass, but I rather suspect that the edge of the carriageway and what from the photographs of the site is at the moment a grass verge are going to be pounded to smithereens when these things move to one side. And I appreciate we don't have a highways expert question, but I would ask Mr McBride if he can give us any indication as to whether measurements of the likely vehicles were taken, what analysis of those vehicles were made, and on what basis was the current recommended enlarged width, by I think it was said 20 centimetres, arrived at. Was the constraint from going larger a matter of cost? Was it purely a highways issue? Were archaeology involved? I noticed there's a land drain to one side. Did that create difficulties? Everything about this application, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty well right, apart from this one thing. Whether we would gain anything from a site visit, I have to say, Chairman, I rather doubt, but deferring to allow officers more time to engage on the width of the road, and if need be, come back to this committee with a very detailed justification of their original recommendation, and if that is their view, why it could not be enlarged. That I think might be helpful to the committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr McBride, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carrington. That's really helpful comments there. I mean, yeah, I think if the committee was minded to look for the 6 metre minimum width for the carriageway, or for the improvements, I would certainly be suggesting that we defer the application to enable that analysis to be undertaken. My understanding is that there are constraints about the highway width and what's adjacent to the highway, which has meant the 5.5 minimum width has been. That's why that figure has come up, has been suggested because of those constraints. So I think that if the committee does feel that they would want to impose a 6 metre wide for the improvements, then that would certainly need to be looked at to make sure that that is physically possible, given the constraints that are in that area. And if it is, then obviously we can come back with that information, and if not, we can explain why that is not possible, and then that will be then for the committee to decide whether 5.5 metres is acceptable given those constraints, if physically 6 metres can't be done.
I'm trying to get my microphone on. Thank you for your comments. I'm just going to jump in front of the Vice Chairman, who's the next person to speak, and say that I hear that Councillor Pepper has proposed a site visit and nobody else has seconded that. I'm going to throw you a curveball in here, and I'm going to second the site visit, but only with having a highways officer present, and only to allow to also allow the committee to see the edges of carriageway to see if it might be feasible, because certainly in a lot of these roads we've said that there are implications with regard to trying to build out any width. It could be that the edges of carriageway cannot be supported. So it could be that the committee will be able to see what the topography is in this part of the world, and it might also allow them to come up with a suitable judgment. It would also allow, rather than just deferring the application, it would also allow that little bit of extra time with regard to the officers bringing forward any comments that might have picked up from today, so we can make a proper judgment at potentially the next meeting. So that's the reasons why I would second a site visit. Vice Chairman, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the debate has moved on quite a bit since I first waved at you. But when I did, and actually in a way that I'm quite happy with, I was simply going, again, not wishing to retread old ground, I was going to say that I fully support the initiative of having that site visit, like you've just said, to allow time to consider the other issue, which is, of course, the highway width, and to add my own voice in general support of that principle, to make sure that that is well researched and something that we look to do. I appreciate there may be challenges to doing it, but I think given the length of operation of this quarry, given the amount of materials, the amount of vehicle journeys, it is these are problems which it is worth not leaving a stone unturned to try and overcome. So I'm simply happy to support the site visit and leave on record my own concerns in respect of highway width.
Certainly, I think that a site visit is also going to put another curveball into the democratic services to actually try and organise. It's going to be an interesting thing to carry out, but I think we're pioneering an awful lot of things today anyway, so it makes life a little more complicated. Mr. McBride, I just see you're eager and keen to come back to me.
No, not really, Chairman, but I will anyway. I think we were just sort of looking at the potential dates between where we are now and the next committee is 3 weeks away. I think we could still obviously do the site visit, but whether that we're then able to bring the report back to the 26th of July committee in terms of getting the report ready and everything. But we'll do our best, but that doesn't stop us having the site visit, and then we can make a decision as to when the report is ready to come back, whether that's July or September.
Thank you for that advice. Obviously, as I did sort of indicate before you spoke, it is a pioneering project trying to organise site visits in COVID times anyway, so there are quite a few constraints behind the scenes to actually organising such a visit, so it might not be that we make the next committee. I don't have anybody else on my list wishing to speak. I will look around and see if nobody else wishes to speak. We do have a printed proposal on the paperwork. I'm looking to see if anybody wishes to support the proposal as it stands. No, so therefore all I can offer to the meeting is a site visit proposed by Councillor Pepper and seconded by myself, and obviously trying to get the constraints of a highways officer to come and to such a visit, to such a site visit, to try and assist us with regard to where we're going. Legal.
Chairman, if I can perhaps just look to assist maybe in the logistics of it all. If the recommendation was to propose a site visit, if the applicant wasn't available, or the applicant wasn't available to agree to the widening of the road, only because I'm slightly conscious that I appreciate there may be limitations on the actual extent of highway, which I think is what Neil was sort of alluding to. But it's only on the point that if within the next 7 days or 10 working days, the applicant was able to say, yes, we agree to the extension, the width of the road to 6 or 6.5, then whether or not the site visit wouldn't be necessary. So I just didn't know whether or not you'd want to include that in the proposal, that it be a site visit be planned unless the applicant comes back through you to confirm that they can extend the road to a width greater than 6 metres. It was only just in relation to logistics of it all.
That all sounds wonderful, but I think I'm still going to sit on my position of site visit, because I think it would be good practice for us to go and look at this part of the world anyway. So there will potentially be areas that are not within the control of the applicant, which we might see. So there is some beneficial education attached to a new committee as well. So I think there's one or two other factors that could help the council with making a good judgment. But it will allow us to take all constraints into place and to make a proper decision at whichever meeting it might come back to. Okay, so all in favour of a site visit, please show now. And that is unanimous, but I will say anybody against and any abstentions. So yes, a long debate, but it looks like we're going to have another debate in the future with some additional information and having seen the site. Thank you for that. A very good debate. So I'll therefore move on to the next item, which is 5.2, and this is to construct a special education needs and disability school on Skellingthorpe Road, Lincoln, at the former Usher Junior School, 2021/0375/CCC. So an officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. My name's Mark Willis and I'm the Applications Manager working in the county's planning team. As the Chairman says, this is one of two papers excuse me, relating to the St Christopher's Special Educational Needs and Disability School. This proposal relates to the development of a new modern purpose-built SEND school on the former Usher School site, which is located just off Skellingthorpe Road to the southwest of the city. The school is proposed to be an entirely new school. It will create places for 130 students and employ 68 staff. Those students primarily will be students that would be transferred from the existing St Christopher's School, but also this development provides an opportunity to increase places for students as well. Neil, if you could just bring on a slide, thank you. Oh, have we not got the presentation? Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, so that just to this first slide shows the location plan of the development site. As I say, Skellingthorpe Road, the application site there is highlighted in red, and you can see sits in a largely residential development area, and Tridden Road runs to the western boundary. Okay, next slide, Neil, please. So this just gives you an overview of the proposed layout. You can see that the site comprises areas of playing field to the western extent, the school setback, which is the white block there in the northern aspect, over the large car parking area, and Mugger in the south. Next slide, Neil. This just gives members an indication of the type, the design of the building. It's a modern, as I say, building which comprises both single and two-storey elements. The tallest element being around 7.8 metres to the parapet, and a palette of different modern materials are proposed throughout the building. Next slide, Neil, please. Has it not moved on? Ah, there's a bit of a delay. This is a slide just showing the frontage of the existing site. This would be the main entranceways onto the site. There are two entrances proposed as part of the facility. One is an existing entrance that would be upgraded, and one would be an upgrading of an existing access which currently isn't used for vehicle traffic to create a one-way system. The application includes, as I say, substantial areas parking within the frontage of the site, around 51 spaces. Go on to the next slide, please. And this just gives you an indication of the two locations of the vehicle entrances. Next slide. The site itself is currently vacant. It is allocated in the Central Lincolnshire Local Plan for Housing Development, or forms part of a wider area that's been allocated for that, and new residential development has taken place on the northern extent. The policy in the local plan identifies it as primarily for housing, which doesn't discount necessarily further uses. Okay, next slide, please. And again, you can see the site itself is largely vacant, comprising just areas of scrub grassland. Next slide. This slide represents the rear of the rear boundary of the school with the newest properties at Westbrook Place. This just is primarily to give an indication of the distance between the boundary of the school and the properties. From point to point, building to the new proposed building of the school will be around 30 metres. Okay. In terms of the report, you will see within the report the various consultation responses that have been received. There's no objections been received from any of the statutory consultees, and we've had 3 representations received in response to consultation. Neither of those have raised particular objection to the proposal, and you'll see that where there's been comments raised, in particular with regard to landscaping and fencing, they are either dealt with within the development itself or recommended through conditions to address those. So the recommendation in terms of pulling it together in the conclusions, as I say, this site is allocated primarily for housing, however, doesn't discount first for future uses. As we all know, the Central Lincolnshire Local Plan is currently going through a review, and it is likely that there will be more sites allocated for housing of less than 10 units within that plan. So the potential loss, if you like, of an area of housing through this development is not seen to fundamentally put at risk the objectives of the plan. In terms of the layout, it's been carefully thought out and laid out in such a way that to keep the taller elements of the building centrally located and wherever possible as far away from the boundaries to minimise any impacts on neighbouring properties. And in particular with regard to highway matters and parking, this school, being an SEND school, has substantial provision for parking within the site. Around, as I say, 51 spaces provided for staff. It's anticipated to be around 50 staff on site at any one time. And in addition to that, there's also dedicated areas for minibuses for the school transport system, vehicles that would bring the children into school. So, subject to the recommendations conditions in the report, it's recommended that planning permission be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Willis, for the introduction. Now, I hope on Teams we have Kaino Adkins, who's the head teacher for the school, who would like to address the meeting, and potentially there might be a question or two to follow after your 3 minutes. So if you'd like to give me a sound check.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. So whenever you're ready, please address us. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Keena Adkins. I'm the head teacher at St Christopher's Special School. I just thought it would be important to sort of explain the reasons why this is such a significant opportunity for us, but also for Lincolnshire. I'm sure we'll all agree that every single child deserves the very best education experience, regardless of their background and ability. For students with additional needs, the key to this experience is having an environment that is flexible and accessible. The new school design proposal aims to bring the real world to life in a safe and secure school setting, giving students access to spaces and facilities that will teach them the key life skills. This year, I've received 203 consults requesting that a child with an educational healthcare plan attends our school. Sadly, I only have on average space to accept between 20 to 25 students per year. This is a typical year, and the worst part of my job is telling parents and students, sorry, we are full. The students that do attend St Christopher's receive an excellent offer in terms of the curriculum and quality of care. However, we are challenged on a daily basis by the constraints of our building. As a school that currently caters for students predominantly with autism, our students are overwhelmed by the current school environment, which has limited breakout spaces, narrow corridors, inaccessible rooms, and very old heating and lighting systems. In addition, there is inadequate car parking for student transport, staff and visitors, meaning that our local residents are understandably frustrated. The large majority of our students currently travel long distances to attend our school, which adds to the challenges they already face. We are very keen to become an all-needs school, so that it means that more students within Lincoln area will be able to attend their local special school, including those with complex medical needs. I believe we need to invest in our children so that they are more likely to be able to make a positive, valuable contribution to our community when they become adults. We also want to invest in our local community, opening up our school at weekends and holidays so that the local organisations and residents can benefit from the grounds and the other facilities. I'd just like to finish with a quote that I have hung in my office that I refer to regularly. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best that they can be. For us, we are their voice and we are their advocates, and a new building will make all the difference to their experience and to the lives of this generation and generations to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Now, are there any questions from the committee to you? Councillor Mrs Newton, please.
Thank you. I've just lost it on here, but I just wanted to refer to a plan that showed a fence and a footpath between some private properties, quite a long footpath. I just wondered who's going to maintain that, and I didn't see any suggestion that there might be any lighting. Are the children expected to use that?
That might be a question for the main debate, but I don't know if Keena, if you know the answer to that one for us.
I can give it a go, but I couldn't be certain. Yes, there is going to be lighting around the boundary fence. I can't say exactly where it's going to be. I believe that between the between the school boundary fence and the residence boundary fence, that is local authority land, but I couldn't be confident.
Thank you. So we'll probably address that one in a couple of minutes. I'm sure that when I ask for an officer roundup, that can be included. Any other comments, questions of the head teacher? No? Well, thank you very much. That's very much appreciated. You are the only speaker to this application, so I will ask Mr Willis if he can help us with that information, and then we'll move into the main debate.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Could we just have the photo back, please? Yeah, just to clarify, so the school boundary is demarked by the palisade fence there that you can see, palisade fence there. So that's actually everything to the left of that picture is then the actual school grounds. That footpath is an access path for, I believe, part of the residential development, so it sits outside the school site. And as is referred to, along that, what is the northern boundary of the school site, it's proposed to be a small bund constructed with landscaping. So that path is effectively sits outside the school site. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I'll therefore move on to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just to say that this is very clearly a welcome contribution to local education provision. It is heartening to see that the paper has been as well prepared as what it has, with the conditions included in there, to the extent that it enjoys the clear support of the District or City Council, the clear support of the local county member, and on everything that I've heard this morning, I'm very happy to move the paper as it is, Mr Chairman.
So moving on to Councillor Ashley Morris.
Thank you very much. This is just a minor point, and it may well be my maths that's up the creek. There seem to be 68 staff members, and according to page 131, 38 staff parking areas. Now, from personal experience in my division in Boston, several schools which have expanded, and I appreciate this is new, not an expansion, have massive problems with parking in various, and this is obviously relatively landlocked by residential property. And the other aspect that I'd like some clarification on, obviously I appreciate a lot of children with special needs do arrive with transport, taxis, minibuses, etc. But it won't be all of them. So drop off and pick up is a huge contentious area. And you feel people could, well, okay, it's 20 minutes, draw your curtains and don't make a fuss. But it doesn't happen. So is there any actual on-site so people can drive in, drop off and pick up, rather than it being on a road which could well be a residential road? So just those couple of points, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, with regard to parking, I think there's 51 spaces. If you look on paragraph 11 of the report, I think there's 51 spaces have been identified in total. Of around 48 of those are specifically designated for staff. In terms of the staffing numbers, my understanding is there are, because the two schools would operate in conjunction with one another, there would be some staff moving between the two sites. but it's anticipated that the level of parking that's been provided reflects the maximum number of staff that will be on site at any one time. In respect of the one-way system and drop-off facility, the school's been designed with the parking arrangements at the front. There'll be 2 accesses which would operate on a one-way system. Therefore, any children that perhaps arrive not on school minibus transport would have an ability to be dropped off within the grounds of the school site and then leave. And then in respect of the minibuses themselves, as part of the development, there is a multi-use games area that would have a dual function as both a games area but also a parking area for those minibuses. So it makes sure that there's sufficient parking to deal with the day-to-day needs of the school.
It does actually say on your diagram on page 131, 38 staff parking areas. So that sort of isn't 48.
The 38 is the sole staff. On top of that, there is visitors, and some of the staff would be moving between the 2 sites. So staff that visit the school that perhaps aren't based solely at that school would use both sites, so would still have access to those additional 10 spaces. So 38 plus the 10 is the 48 spaces that will be usable by staff and or visitors.
So my next speaker is Councillor Mrs Newton.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I support Councillor Ashley Morris on the concern here. It happens to us all, and I think I spend more time on this issue than on anything. And I would see my inbox this morning with 2 or 3 letters from my highway officers and the lines people, and photographs that I'm quite happy to get people to put up, where idiot people come in to collect children. They park over people's driveways. And not only that, the staff at some of the Spalding schools park, because they have to, on the roads, and I know there's nothing to stop them, but if we could alleviate this at the planning stage and make more room for the permanent members of staff, it would make our schools more user-friendly and cause us as members less hassle. We've got to get this right, because if we're building our schools so big to start with, that we've got no room for expansion, no room for any more teachers, and the staff are already going to have to park on the side of the road. It's bad news for the community. I don't like it at all.
Of course, the planning application in front of you is what we are considering today, and it's whether you accept the parking constraints or not. And parking, I think at every school in the county, is an interesting issue, whereby parents might park closer to schools, parents might park on double yellow lines in boxes. I have some examples in my county division where where residents go home and find that some parents have actually parked on private driveways. So there are some interesting constraints. So really this just comes down to whether you find the application acceptable or not. If you don't find the parking acceptable, well, you'll have to make a judgment. I'm going to introduce Councillor Mrs Ashton and then go back to Mr Willis. It's my funny glasses. I blame Specsavers.
Right, well, I need better glasses for being up here. This is a dedicated special needs school, isn't it? I don't know whether it's actually possible still to question our head teacher, who was present a moment ago. But I'm assuming that although not all children will be coming in special transport, although a lot will be, that I would be anticipating that even those from a local location will be brought onto site by whoever is accompanying them and handed over to the appropriate teacher or other person. Now, I don't know whether that is possible for that to be answered. because this is what I would have expected with a special needs school. However, I gather that it does obviously cover a wide spectrum of special needs. Is anyone available to answer that, please?
Hello, I'm Keena Adkins, head teacher. If councillor's okay for me to answer, I'm happy to do so. It might answer some of the other questions as well. First of all, we've done a significant survey with our current staff to identify whether they would be walking or travelling by public transport, etc. And we've got a primary school travel plan which takes into account for that. Quite a few of our staff actually on the new site are able to walk to the site because they are in close proximity. So that just answers that first one. But also in terms of the students, I would suggest, because they are our primary children only, they're not our secondary children, all of them will be brought onto site by an adult, whether that be their own family or by transport. We've also done the analysis of how many students we anticipate will become via transport, and it is a significant number. The majority of students, I would suggest less than 5%, would be coming by parent drop-off and pick-up. And yes, the parents will be asked to bring their car or to walk onto the site. The gates will be shut to prevent any students absconding, and then the students will be handed over in person to an adult. And then when all the students are in the building, then we will open the gates for parents to leave. Our parents are really good at understanding the complexities of transport. As our current site will show, it is a challenge, but we are very, very effective at making sure the students safely get in and out of school, whilst recognising the challenges of getting them off of the main road.
Thank you for that very useful information. It's an unusual practice whereby somebody would come back and speak to the committee. However, I did have it whispered in my ear a couple of minutes ago before you made your comments, and I was very agreeable to you coming back to help us with regard to the pupil management on access and egress. So that's wonderful. Thank you for your comments, much appreciated. However, Mr. Willis, I'm going to allow you an opportunity now.
I don't really need to say much more, actually. I think other than to stress the point that actually, as we've said, the transport arrangements on an SEND school are completely different to that of a mainstream school. The problems that we see with parking on mainstream schools is not the same in terms of parental parking as it is on an SEND school. And in terms of the level of parking that's provided, this is quite a unique situation, I guess, in regard to SEND schools, about the number of parking spaces we provide per members of staff. It's not quite a one-to-one provision, but it's nearly there, and it's consistent with the approach that we took at the Boston school, which I think some of the members may be familiar with, that we granted last year or so. And we've also got to remember there is a travel plan, which has been referenced. So, as I say, I think from the officer's point of view, the development's been trying to balance all of those interests, and the level of parking strikes a reasonable balance given the anticipated staff movements.
Thank you for those comments. I'm going to second that we grant permission for this site. I think that the head teacher was very useful with the comments with regard to the access and egress, and certainly it's been proposed by my vice chairman some time ago that we should grant permission. I think that the issue with regard to the traffic management will be closely monitored by both schools at this location. It is a tight site, but certainly the ability to give children a suitable education, I believe, is very, very useful to Lincolnshire. Councillor Mrs. Overton.
Thank you. I was just going to second it. I think the question was rightly raised because it's certainly a big issue for many of us with school transport. So I think it was good to raise it and hear the answer. And certainly we've got a very unusual arrival procedure, which for me must be one of the best, I think, where children are actually brought in and then everybody waits until they're right inside the school. So I think that's very good to hear. So just a good support, and it was very nice to actually hear from the head teacher as well. I think that was very heartening. Thank you.
Yes, I think we're in unusual times. We're doing a committee, we're pioneering all sorts of new ways. So the head teacher took me slightly by surprise, but that's no problem. Okay, so Councillor Mrs Austin.
Right, I'm allowed to speak now, am I, again, because of course I was only asking a question before. Right, thank you. I'm very keen to support this application. I've been supportive locally in Boston of the John Fielding school, which now, and I actually have witnessed the traffic situation there, but of course now they're moving to a new site, so that I think speaks for itself. I don't have a prejudicial interest, but I have a grandson with special needs, but since he is in the Irish Republic, I don't think that gives me anything I need to actually declare, does it? But any child, but especially one with special needs, deserves good surroundings, and I think more so than probably any other type of child. So that, plus the fact that I'm confident with the trouble that's been taken regarding the traffic management, I'm very, very happy to support this. Thank you.
Good. I don't think I need to refer to the officer for this one, so therefore I'm going to take it nearly straight to the vote. I'm going to allow legal to have a comment.
Thank you, Chairman. It was a very technical point, just to confirm that the recommendation was to include the updated condition. Thank you.
And I agree, it is to include the updated condition. And the Vice Chairman is nodding to me, so he's in agreement of being the proposer. So therefore I'm going to put it to the vote. All in favour, please show now. I think that's everybody. No, it isn't. It's one down. Those against? Abstentions. One abstention. Two abstentions. Yes, certainly.
I'd like it to be recorded because I had a similar problem at a Wygat school where we were assured that we wouldn't have this issue. I spend hours every week and people do disturb the neighbours, and I should like to think that I'm going to come back, that I've not got to come back here in this term within the next 4 years and hear people complain about people parking over folks' driveways. But I bet I will. Thank you. So I'd like to have it recorded, my concern. Thank you.
Can I ask the comment, is the school you're referring to an SEND school? The school you're referring to, is it an SEND school where you're having issues?
The school I'm referring to came before us within the last 4 years for an extension and a nursery.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, so that one is granted. So I'll therefore move you on rapidly. I will put my glasses on there. To the next application, demolition of existing buildings, sports hall, mobile classrooms and construct new appropriate buildings at St Christopher's School, Highcombe Road, Lincoln, 2021/0379/CCC. Officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as you say, this is the second proposal relating to St Christopher's SEND School. This is now the redevelopment of the existing school site. The school at the moment is both a primary and secondary school proposal, and as we've just seen from the last item, the intention is to run the school on 2 sites, with the Usher School site now transferring to a primary. Subject to that then being completed, the intention is to modernise and redevelop the existing school to become a secondary school solely, and therefore increase places available to secondary school age children. And that comprises of a demolition of existing block and sports hall and mobile classroom units, with a replacement with a new modern 2-storey block, along with additional modernisation works within the site. The school currently has around 228 pupils on site. That's both primary and secondary school pupils, and 90 staff. Once redeveloped, then the school would actually offer 203 places and accommodate 68 staff. So it's a net reduction on site, albeit a increase in actual secondary school places overall. In terms of the slides, this is the photo. Oh, so could I have a presentation, please? This is just a general location plan showing the site itself. It sits off Highcombe Road, and you can see the red line site boundary there. the large area of playing field to the northwest aspect, with the main building complex in the southwest corner. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a proposed, again, of layout. You can see just a bit more detail about the existing this is the proposed arrangements. Again, you can see within this development the white block in the centre. That would be the new building block, with areas of parking created and a mugger just into the northern boundary there. Next slide. This is some photographs of the existing school. The school's currently comprised of essentially single-storey elements, and it's proposed to demolish this main building here. Next slide, please. And reference the sports hall there, just on the right-hand side of the picture, and the existing mobile classroom units. Part of this proposal is to increase the accommodation, negating therefore the need for these mobile units, and as part of that there'll be then creation of hard-standing areas and mugger as part of the scheme. Next slide. Again, so the main block itself is a two-storey element. So again, would be up to 8.8 metres high in terms of the main building. There is a stairwell block you can just see on those elevations that takes that small element slightly higher. I think it's about 10.3 metres high in total. The block itself accommodate a number of different facilities in terms of classrooms, but also enabling hydrotherapy, pools, therapy rooms and specialist treatment rooms. Move on. So in terms of the report or the development, as part of the development again, there'll be a redevelopment of the site to provide increased parking to accommodate staff, reconfiguration of the parking areas that are currently in place. The school itself would be operational during any redevelopment, so as part of the scheme it's been necessary to try and segregate the operations of the site whilst construction would take place, and that would necessitate a creation of a temporary parking area for staff and for entrance of students, which was proposed. If you just go back one, Neil, please. Entrance here off Wallace Avenue, and then a temporary construction of a car parking area, if we can move on, please, into the playing field space here. In terms of, next slide, please. Again, this just shows a location of the existing entrance. This would be used by construction traffic during the build, and you can see the parking provision within the existing site. It is, a heavily used site in terms of staff. It's a historical site, so it's been developed over a number of years. However, as I say, there's to a degree, it's been accepted to be able to accommodate the staff there. This facility would only improve the situation by the proposals on front of members today. In terms of the consultation responses received, again, no statutory consultees have objected to the proposal redevelopment. We notified around 162 neighbours that border the site, and of those we've had 6 representations received, 5 which are objections to the proposal, which are set out within the report. I don't propose to go through those in detail. I'm sure members have familiarised themselves with those. They're on page 171 and 172. We've also had a petition of around 12 signatories, again raising issues about the development. Those main objections come from the residents which back onto the school on Wallace Avenue and raise concerns about the proximity of the building, the height of the building, and the impacts it may have on the use and enjoyment of those properties. Just move on, I'll just see if there's any more. Okay, yeah, we can leave those on screen, thank you. Again, similar to the previous proposal, in terms of the building, it's been of a modern design. It is two-storey element to ensure that the necessary facilities can be accommodated given the small footprint of the school. In terms of the height of the building, as I say, is 2 stories and would be set back again within the existing footprint of the existing block. In terms of distance, and just give members some idea of proximity, the nearest property from building again to building is around 43 metres. So that's greater than that which we've just considered on the last proposal, albeit it would be about 20 metres from the building to the boundary of those rear gardens. Again, in terms of the recommendations, you'll see within the report, all matters have been considered and are deemed acceptable. Whilst the objections have been raised by local residents and noted, when considered on balance, it's considered that the development's acceptable and that conditions have been proposed to make development address some of those issues if they've not already been designed into the scheme. So the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to those conditions set out in the report.
Thank you very much. We have no public speakers to this application, so therefore I'm going to open the debate. Who would like to be my first speaker? And seeing none, I think that we've talked to this site previously. Vice Chairman.
I was just going to sustain the point that I made in relation to the previous application, that this seemed to be a well thought out development. It's pleasing to see that it's looking at being two-storey. Too often the construction of schools seem to be to spread out like a sprawling, ever-expanding bungalow, taking up ever more field space and car parking space. So actually I can see the sense in going two-stories with this. And I'm more than happy to support the paper, Mr. Chairman. I imagine colleagues may have similar concerns in respect of car parking, and actually looking on my screen at Google Earth, this does actually seem to be quite a cramped site, but I'm satisfied at paragraph 18 on page 164 that, again, similar as we'll be familiar with the previous application, this is something that has been at least reflected in the text of the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashley Morris.
Thank you, Chairman. Same again, I'm afraid. Page 172, amongst the objections, and I appreciate many of them are a little bit not in my backyard, but there obviously has been an issue in the past with this site because someone has commented that yellow line marking has only made the situation worse. And I've found exactly the same in various areas in my division, that the yellow line marking, while commendable for the people that it directly affects, simply moves it on to someone else. And it just seems to be, I mean, an issue that we've got. It's terrifically good that this school is proposed, and I think fundamentally I shall support it. But this issue of parking is such a big thing. And exactly as my colleague said, it crops up time after time after time. I have 2 schools in my area, very much less than most people probably, but both of those, it occurs again and again. So, I mean, it's just a comment and perhaps could be passed on to anyone appropriate. And I appreciate probably there's nothing we can do, but it obviously has been a problem here already, and an increase is not going to make that any better. Thank you.
I'm sure that whoever is listening to the debate is picking up on the points about car parking, and I'm sure that whoever is designing the new schools are hopefully looking at the concept of giving suitable employees, staff, the ability to get in and out of the sites. This is a remodelling of the same site we've just talked about, so I think we've had the main car parking debate already. I'm quite happy to propose this application. I think that if there is an opportunity, again, to give pupils, children, young people, the ability to enjoy education, I think we should grant the teachers the ability to excel their skills and to educate the young children of Lincolnshire to the best of the abilities that we can. So I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation.
Seconded.
Vice Chairman.
Very happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
I was only going to second it, thanks.
I accept completely that all schools in Lincolnshire do seem to, I don't think it's so much the staffing issue. I think it's potentially, no matter, in my own division, a lot of head teachers talk to me about how they try and manage pupils going in and out of sites. But sometimes it's the parents and trying to get the message across to parents that they park in the appropriate places. And yes, it might be that, I don't know, little Johnny or Super Sarah is the apple of their eye and more important than any other pupil. But sometimes some parents do create hazards. which are not useful. And the game of trying to park as close to the school gate is an interesting debate. A lot of parents don't just do access and egress, drop off and pick up. Some parents do spend quite some considerable time outside of schools, and it can make a difficulty. So yes, it's important that we do try and get it right, but a lot of it does have to come down to parental responsibility too. Okay, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox here. You wish to speak? Okay, thank you. So I'm therefore going to take it to the vote. All in favour, please show now. And for all in the room, that is unanimous. Anybody against, any abstentions? And I'm very pleased to say that the committee have all this morning agreed with one planning application that we can go in the same direction, so that's excellent. Okay, so therefore that brings me, I believe, to the end of my agenda. So thank you all for attending, and thank you for all the excellent debates we've had this morning. Mr McBride.
So, Chairman, we want to do it, well, we're still in the meeting, but so we're going to look at dates for site visit?
What sort of dates do you have available?
I'm as flexible as I need to be, really.
This is possibly the best game of tennis you're going to see all week, because we're going to play ping pong here. So,
I would suggest that we do it after the 19th of July.
Excellent. So can I propose that Nick sends out a couple of dates via email, and we agree where the maximum number that can attend one of those two dates. Okay, so therefore that can fit in with your agenda, and it could potentially get the maximum coverage with members as well. Okay, if everyone's happy with that. Thank you. So,
sorry, Tim, just the local member gets invited as well, don't they, I think, as a normal course?
The local member can attend, but again, it's not a lobbying exercise.
Got to ask.
And we aren't expecting lots of public, etc., to come along.
Yeah.
It is a site visit is specifically for the committee to find information about that site and to gain knowledge accordingly. Okay, so I can wish you all a safe journey home now, and I hope you and your family stay safe.